Welcome, my friends, to Next Level Change Success, a change conversation for leaders, project and change practitioners for today and tomorrow. My name is Therese Perez of myvirtualchangemanager.com, and I'm an experienced change and project professional and people leader with many years of experience in the industry. I love business, and I love the people side of business especially. So nothing lights me up more than seeing people use change management, project management, and strong change leadership to engage, motivate, and inspire people, and ultimately transform organisations. If you've heard about change management and have no idea of what it involves, then you're in the right place. If you know about change management, but you want to take your practices to the next level, then this is where you should be. I'm going to share the stories of my experiences, interview some fantastic people, and I'm going to explore all of the challenges and opportunities that you face in organisations right now. So please join me and let's go and have some fun. Hello. Welcome to another episode of Next Level Change Success. My name is Therese Perez and I'm the founder of myvirtualchangemanager.com. And I would like to welcome you today. I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional owners and custodians on the land on which I am recording. And today we are talking about the fear of change. Is it real or just an illusion? And I want to talk about all the different aspects of change that could elicit fear and anxiety, because there is a lot of conversation around change resilience. How do you build resilience within teams, organizations, and individuals? And I think one of the elements to talk about is that resilience in and of itself, a lot of humans probably underestimate their level of resilience when it comes to change. There's two sides to this coin. One is if you have managed change well, the resilience requirement will be lessened, because you will actually have delivered the change well. And part of how you approach change and deliver change and approach any also design helps to alleviate anxiety, stress, and therefore less resilience is required to go through the change. So let's step through it, because there's different aspects to look at this, different lenses to look at this through. There is definitely, when it comes to change, as I talked about, the approach is so key. And I learnt this when working with First Nations people, because I sat in a great deal of humility just to learn, because I feel like that Australia's First Nations people understand the very essence of change, which is the self-determination element. That to sit, to listen is so key in a cultural context. I would say that I probably didn't learn it as well as I should have, could have, but certainly went into a big deep dive through the generosity of the people who I worked with to understand the cultural aspects, as well as just the wisdom that sits through the practice of sitting and listening. And that is the starting point of change, is the ability to listen, and through then building the connection and the relationship and continuing the conversation, there's a level of trust that gets formed between two humans, two people, or a group of people around then co-designing, co-creating a solution that's going to work, and try and make that solution a win-win for everyone. Once again, with the foundation of trust and respect, which then supports, as you go through the change, the implementation of that change, and the understanding and acknowledgement then that there will be subsequent requirement to work differently, to behave differently, to have an outcome achieved together. So that building of trust and relationship is really foundational to alleviating stress and fear for individuals. That fear and that gap between design and delivery and implementation, the fear aspect is when there isn't any information provided. It starts to increase the fear factor with the change. And it's not an illusion, it's very real. And this is quite key when it comes to the whole concept of change, is that people can be dismissive and there can be an arrogance and an ill-informed view when looking at change, with almost a requirement or a rule that says, look, people just have to get on board with this change. They just have to accept it and move on. And the reality of humans is that it's not that easy. And I learn this lesson every day with my 4.5-year-old around, you can try and tell someone, but they don't have to, because of the freedom of choice, they don't have to get on board. So the art of influence when it comes to change, and the art of building relationship and trust and supporting people through the change, means that you understand each individual is different. Some people may need a repeat of information in a different way. Some people may relate to it better if it's told through story. Most people would. Some people would need the visual versus the verbal explanation. And you're better off, because of the diversity of the way in which people absorb information, is to not just repeat it time and time again, but also to show and tell the message in different ways and through different mediums and modalities. And this is really key, because every time you do that, you are building a bridge with that person to help them get from where they currently are through the change to another comfortable place in the future, which is your future state. And it's the responsibility of leaders to actually undertake that and to support their people through that, and they have a sense of empathy with the individuals to take them through that journey. And it's very, very important, because it will impact the level of outcome that you can achieve. But also, just fundamentally, you do want everyone to come on the journey with you if they can. You want them to choose to be on that journey with you, is probably a more relevant phrasing, so that they can really embrace and feel part of the change, which is where their anxiety and the fear associated with that change will be minimized, because they're on the journey with you, which is quite key. Now, I've talked a lot about the people who are impacted by the change, because obviously, oftentimes they're the majority. But let's also talk about leaders and the fear curve that most leaders go through when they are needing to support and deliver a change themselves. And sometimes, especially if it's in relation to people's roles, their jobs, if it's something to do with job security, team changes, the ways of working, these are the things that most leaders feel anxiety about as well when they're delivering the message. They can feel nervous, they can feel a bit out of their depth. And if you're a new leader, you most certainly, the first time that you have a lot of these conversations, even standard performance feedback conversations, that can be a scary place. If it's requiring change within the team, you're having to manage the reaction of the team, possibly having to manage the reaction of an individual who's impacted. And once again, that can be a scary place. And even on major transformational programs, leaders can get to a point where they're about to go live and they become extremely nervous about having to communicate the change to the rest of the organisation and to take that step. And I've often had communications or change people say to me, I'm surprised that when it has come to the go live or the launch, even though we're ready, that the leader doesn't want to send out the communications. They're nervous. And I talk to them about how they can support that leader to feel confident in it, provide them with the information, provide them with the we are ready. And that has to do a little bit with the change readiness assessment, so that they have data to prove that, and that they will press the button and overcome that fear. Even if it's a positive change, sometimes that can happen. So fear is a very big reality when it comes to change. It's natural. And the other element of fear is that it can come up as anger. It can come back as conflict. It can come back as it can be quite aggressive at times. The blowback that can happen. And what I say to most change practitioners, and over time you certainly become used to this, is there's a level of resilience that gets formed as part of this process, because it's understood after the first time that you're implementing quite a significant change that everyone won't be happy with it. But you don't react to that emotional response and reaction that you initially have. And so part of it is you have to stay the course. And I've obviously often had to counsel, whether it be change people, project people, leaders, on that concept of stay the course, because when you go through change, it's choppy waters to begin with. And over time, then when you introduce change again and again, you will know it's almost eerie if there isn't any such response to a change you've brought in. You might want to question whether your message is being heard, whether the new ways of working are actually being followed, if there is no noise that's coming back or no feedback through the channels that you have provided. I do remember one go live that we had where everyone was so well versed. It was a phase 2 of a major program, and we went live. There was no blowback. There was no pushback. And we went to the pub at about 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And my work colleague and I, she was almost disappointed that there wasn't any noise or anything we had to rectify. But that is very rare. And it was really because it was phase 2 of a program. It's just additional functionality. And the first rollout that we did was so labour intensive for support to embed the change that this next add-on was well received and no noise, which is, I guess, the best outcome. But it was a little bit disconcerting. So we had to do some call arounds, just double check that everyone was okay on board and it wasn't a problem at all. So that, you have those rare occasions, but really it's oftentimes there is feedback on day one, feedback in, initially after go live, issues that you have to troubleshoot and resolve, and then continue on the embedding path. But it is important to stay the course. And that can happen as you're even heading up to go live, as more resistance may seem and more fear starts to set in if it is a large scale change. And if that's the case, this is where change readiness really comes into play, because you have an objective reference point about these are the activities we're doing, this is the feedback we're hearing, this is what we're doing to solve those issues, and now we want to press the go button because we're ready. We're as ready as we're ever going to be. And then you step into that. Now, I mentioned before, and I think it is really relevant, that there is this gap between what you intend from a change perspective and how ready you are and how well you're communicating, whether you've rolled out your training as part of the program. If that is all happening, then you absolutely are going to get a good trend line, and over time the fear is going to dissipate into confidence and readiness for the change to be put into place. Now, I know that many programs or projects don't have the luxury of time, but the trade-off is that there may be more resistance and that it could have a longer term impact on engagement of your staff by introducing change that hasn't been managed well. If you continue to do that over time and time again, your engagement scores, your staff turnover, all of those things, they're going to really start to impact your business and show up. What is ironic is oftentimes leaders will be like, I don't know what's going on. What's happening? And it's like, well, you're introducing too much change too hard and fast without the appropriate communication, leadership, engagement. So people go from just being afraid of a change to fundamental distrust. It's like we're not getting told what's happening. Oftentimes then a sense of paranoia sets in across your organisation, and then you're wondering what's going on. So and then it becomes disgruntlement, fundamental disgruntlement. So there's a few things to consider there around not only the fact that one of the reasons why you actually explore change management and bring those skills in and that support into the organisation is to retain and leverage engagement from your staff. the approach that you take really does help to build that trust as well, because you are including people in the change. You're including people in solving the problems and creating solutions that you can implement going forward. And you're playing back to the organisation the success and the learning that you've had by going through that process. So if you think about the different cultural context of that, then that's very different where there's trust versus distrust in an organisation. A distrust has a lot of fear sitting in the cultural context, and a lot of fear possibly even sitting within the organisation hierarchy, and lack of trust. And so these things can be quite inherent in organisations if they're not managing change, if they're just becoming a dictatorship and a bit of a, everyone just has to get on board type of leadership style. Is over time that just erodes any sense of trust, and you will lose talent also as part of that, of course. So fear in change context can sit with leaders. It can sit with the people who are impacted, and it can also sit with the change practitioner. This is important as well because they can also start to get nervous. There's a level of resilience as you've gone through change time and time again and delivered change time and time again, where you will have a sense of ability to push past the fear because you've built that muscle. But certainly if you're new to change and how to deliver change, you well may find that you are nervous about delivering it. Certainly early in my career, I built up the resilience from being a marketer and sending marketing campaigns out to customers. And if you want to talk about fear and I guess a sense of stress, certainly before any campaign launched, there was always a sense of anxiety and fear. And it kind of is the same when it comes to the change landscape. So luckily or unfortunately, I'd had to build that muscle so that when it came to change and you're looking to roll out once again your campaign, communicate about the change, get the change ready with the project team, make sure that all the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. There's the same concept around readiness that sits there as it used to sit in the marketing campaigns. Every time it seemed that when I pressed or signed off on a spec, in those days it was a bit of a print mock-up, and I'd sign off on the brochure to be printed or the direct mail to go out. Certainly that was an anxiety-inducing time. You get document blindness. You'd learn to get someone else to proof. When you're looking at the proofs, you get someone else to look at it if you needed to. Make sure that all the changes that you'd spec'd up. It really honed in attention to detail. It is definitely more difficult on screen now to pick up things that may not be as accurate. In the old days, you can imagine the bunny ears I've put up in the old days. You had big sheets of proofs that you would scan, mark up any markings that were not, just make sure there were, issues with ink. You'd be marking those up to make sure that the printer addressed those before it went to print. The key things that you check were a contact number, making sure your contact numbers were correct, because sometimes they were the key things. They were the hints and tips that you got from people. Make sure the direct line is the right number, because you'd hear about horror stories on that. I'm sure nowadays with email campaigns or other campaigns that this still happens within the marketing and agency space. But certainly when it comes to campaigns and certainly internal change campaigns now, I still have that sense of nervousness. I still have that little bit of, here we go. And then keep the ear to the ground once something's gone live or once, the broadcast email's gone out. But the beauty of change, and from an internal perspective, is that you've already got the feet on the ground because of the prep work that you've done beforehand, if it is a large-scale change. So it's just part of the beginning once you press that go live button. But I just want to acknowledge that the anxiety could still be there from a change perspective and from a change practitioner perspective. And the resilience is that mindfulness, the ability and self-awareness to acknowledge that, I'm feeling anxious because I'm about to have a go live. and know that you put measures into place in your life before a go live, where you're getting good sleep, where you're not being asked too much of potentially at home, so that you can focus on the job at hand and be available for your work colleagues to make sure that they're supported through the change. It's all the way in which you manage that point in your program. And obviously after day one of a go live, that there's feedback loops and checkpoint meetings and things that you have to get the feedback and deal with any issues that might arise, and already have those processes in place. So once again, that's how you can manage the fear, which can feel very, very real. And over time, you realise that it's just all part of the natural response to change. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I hope it was a bit insightful for you, depending on what your role is, whether you're being impacted by a change, whether you're introducing change, whether you're leading change, or whether you're a change practitioner. And if you are enjoying this podcast series, please subscribe. Please spread the word to family, friends, anyone who works in this industry, anyone who is looking, whether they're in a corporate services support role, so they're looking to influence people through change, looking to introduce new work practices. If someone's new to people leadership, get them in on the change gig, because it's going to add value to the way they work. Come visit us at myvirtualchangemanager.com, subscribe to our newsletter, stay informed, keep in touch, and keep that one step ahead by understanding next level change success. And remember that change matters because your people matter. Have a great day.